All right, welcome back to our conflict resolution deep dive.
Part 3.
We've covered a lot of ground. We talked about that structured AEIOU model, and then we got into the more in-depth navigating beliefs.
Right. And these two methods really complement each other.
Okay, cool.
So we've got navigating beliefs, which helps us unpack the why behind what we think, the reasons that we hold certain views. And then there's the AEIOU method, which gives us a really clear path forward for communicating and finding solutions, even when beliefs clash.
So it's kind of like a 1-2 punch.
Yeah, exactly.
And you figure out why we believe what we believe, and then we use that understanding to actually go and resolve disagreements. It's way better than just arguing about who's right.
Absolutely. It's about going deeper than that surface level and delving into the complexities of human reasoning and emotion.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Yeah.
First up, navigating beliefs. I'm picturing myself as like a detective, going and looking for clues, examining the evidence, figuring out how we arrive at our conclusions.
Uh-huh.
How do we actually do that, though? Is it just asking why over and over again?
Well, it's a little more nuanced than that. Think of it as guiding someone through their own thought process. And a really key tool here is Socratic questioning.
Okay.
So imagine you're in a conflict with someone who just insists that a certain project is doomed to fail. Instead of arguing, you could ask, well, what data or past experiences made you come to that conclusion?
So you're not directly challenging their belief, but you're prompting them to really articulate their reasoning.
Yeah.
And then by doing that, maybe they uncover some hidden assumptions or biases they didn't even realize they had.
Exactly. And that's where the magic happens. The goal isn't about you winning the argument. It's about facilitating self-reflection. Maybe they realize that their belief is based on a gut feeling rather than evidence, or they uncover a past experience that's really coloring their judgment.
That's a powerful shift.
Yeah.
Instead of being defensive, now they're open to kind of exploring their own thinking.
Exactly.
But isn't there a risk that when you start questioning people's beliefs,
Yeah.
they're just going to get defensive and shut down?
Absolutely. That's a valid concern. The key is to approach it with genuine curiosity and respect, not judgment. It's about saying, hey, I want to understand your perspective. Help me see how you came to this conclusion.
Yeah.
The tone and the intent behind the questions are crucial.
It's not an interrogation. It's a collaborative exploration.
Exactly.
And this exploration can lead to some pretty surprising insights, not just for the person being questioned, but also for the questioner.
Absolutely.
You might start to see things from a different angle that you hadn't even considered before.
Exactly. That's why navigating beliefs is so valuable, even outside of resolving conflicts. It helps us develop critical thinking skills and challenge our own assumptions.
Yeah.
Become more open-minded people.
I love that.
Yeah.
So it's about personal growth as much as about resolving disagreements.
It is.
Okay, so we've got this foundation of understanding our own beliefs and understanding the books of others.
Yeah.
But how do we actually move forward and find solutions? That's where this AEIOU method comes in, right?
Yes. That's where we go from understanding to action.
Go.
AEIOU stands for Acknowledge, Express, Identify, Outline, and Understand. It's a structured approach that breaks down the conflict resolution process into these manageable steps.
Okay, walk me through this. Let's start with acknowledge. What does that actually look like in practice?
So imagine you're in this really heated team meeting.
Okay.
People are talking over each other, and the conflict is really escalating. Acknowledge just means stating the obvious that there's a disagreement. You could say something like, it seems like we have some different views on how to proceed. Let's just take a second to acknowledge that.
It's like you're hitting the pause button.
Yeah, exactly.
You're creating space for everyone to just breathe and step back from that emotional intensity.
Exactly. It diffuses the tension and sets the stage for a better conversation. It also establishes that everyone has the right to their own viewpoint.
And that feeling of being validated is crucial.
Yes. Especially when people are feeling emotional.
Yeah, okay, so then we've acknowledged that there's a conflict. What's next?
Then we go to express.
Mm-hmm.
This is where each person gets to share their feelings about the situation using I statements.
What?
For example, I feel frustrated because, or I'm concerned that.
So instead of blaming or accusing each other, you're focusing on your own emotional experience.
Precisely.
That's a key distinction.
Yeah.
Because when you express your feelings in a non-judgmental way, it's less likely to trigger that defensiveness in the other person.
You're right. It shifts the dynamic from you versus me to we're in this together trying to understand each other's feelings. It's amazing how much tension can be released when people feel truly heard.
But that express step can be tricky.
Oh, for sure.
Because sometimes it's hard to even identify what we're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we know we're upset, but putting it into words is hard. And there's always that risk that those emotions are going to spill over and we end up blaming or accusing anyway.
You're hitting on a really crucial point. Self-awareness is key here.
Yeah.
If you're feeling overwhelmed, it's okay to say, I need a minute to process my feelings before we keep going.
Okay.
And remember, express is not about venting or attacking.
Yeah.
It's about communicating your experience in a way that fosters understanding.
Okay, so we've acknowledged the conflict. We've expressed our feelings.
Okay.
What comes next in this AEIOU method?
Now we get to the heart of the matter with identify.
Okay.
This is where we get specific about what each person wants, their goals, their priorities, their desired outcomes.
This feels like it could get tricky,
It can.
especially if those goals just seem totally incompatible.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that without it turning into a tug of war?
Well, it's about shifting from positions to interests. Instead of arguing about solutions, you explore the underlying needs and motivations that are driving those solutions.
Hey, can you give me a real-world example?
Sure. Imagine a neighborhood group arguing over a proposed park redesign.
Okay.
One side wants a playground, the other side wants a community garden.
Right. It's easy to get stuck in just arguing out which feature is better.
Yeah,
But if you ask, okay, what's the core need behind each of these proposals?
exactly.
The playground people probably value a space for kids to play and socialize, while the garden people want access to fresh food, green space, a sense of community.
Exactly. And suddenly, it's not about playground versus garden. It's about how do you create a space that supports the needs of children and the community's desire for healthy living and connection.
Wow, that's a game changer.
Yeah,
By focusing on those underlying interests, you're creating so much more room for creative solutions.
exactly. And that's what the outline step is all about, brainstorming solutions together.
Okay.
This is where you encourage collaboration, get the creative juices flowing, and explore different ways to meet those identified needs.
Like a whiteboard full of possibilities.
Yeah, exactly.
But what if even after all of that, there's still no obvious win-win solution?
Right.
What happens when compromise is tough or some needs just can't be fully met?
That's the reality of a lot of conflicts.
Yeah.
That's where skillful facilitation is crucial. Sometimes it means helping people redefine what winning means. It might not be about getting everything you initially wanted, but finding the solution that does the least harm or has the most shared benefit.
So helping people to see the bigger picture and weigh the potential trade-offs.
Exactly.
But wouldn't it be helpful to have some specific strategies for that outline step? Because brainstorming can feel overwhelming, especially when there are all these big emotions involved.
Absolutely. This is where preparation and structure can be really helpful. Before a conflict resolution session, encourage each side to come up with some possible solutions on their own.
Yep.
That way they come prepared with ideas and are less likely to feel put on the spot.
That's a great tip.
Yeah. You can also use visual aids like mind maps or flowcharts to organize all the ideas and make brainstorming more engaging.
And don't underestimate the power of time constraints.
A little bit of pressure can really boost creativity.
Okay, so we've brainstormed all these potential solutions.
Yeah.
How do we move from this jumble of ideas to a concrete agreement? That's where the understand step comes in, right?
Yeah. This is where we bring clarity and solidify the path forward. It's not enough to just agree in principle. We need concrete actions.
Oh, yeah.
This means outlining the specific steps that will be taken, who is responsible, and by when.
So you're turning those well-intentioned promises into an actual action plan.
Exactly.
But what if, even with all this planning, things start to unravel later on?
Sure.
Do we have to start this whole AEIOU process all over again?
Not necessarily. That's the beauty of this method. It's designed to be flexible. The understand step should include a plan for monitoring progress, addressing new challenges that come up, even renegotiating parts of the agreement if you need to.
So it's not a one-and-done deal. It's a framework for this ongoing dialogue and collaboration. That's reassuring because, let's face it, even the best laid plans can go wrong.
Of course. And that's where the combination of navigating beliefs and AEIOU is really powerful.
Okay.
By understanding the underlying beliefs and motivations, we're much better equipped to deal with those bumps in the road.
Okay. So we've covered the why and the how,
Uh-huh.
this dynamic duo of methods that can change how we approach conflict.
It really can.
But what does success actually look like when you're using these approaches? Is it just about coming to an agreement, or is there something more profound going on?
I think success is about more than just a signed contract or a handshake.
Okay.
It's about creating a shift in mindset, both individually and collectively.
What do you mean by that?
Let's say you're mediating a workplace conflict.
Okay.
Two colleagues have been clashing for months, and there's all this resentment. You guide them through this process, and they eventually come to agreement. True success is when you see those colleagues interacting weeks or even months later.
Okay, I'm imagining them actually listening to each other, respecting each other's boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even collaborating on a project without all that tension.
Exactly. It's a change in how they communicate with each other, a greater awareness of their own triggers and biases, a willingness to approach disagreements with curiosity rather than defensiveness. That's how you know these methods have really taken root.
That's a powerful vision. It's not just about resolving this specific conflict. It's about creating this more harmonious and productive environment.
Exactly.
So what about those really, really tough situations where people are just so entrenched in their beliefs or the conflict seems impossibly complex? Do these methods still work?
That's a great question, and it leads us into what we might call advanced conflict resolution. Because while navigating beliefs and AEIOU provide a really solid foundation, there are times when we need to dig deeper,
Okay.
understand the power dynamics, the systemic issues, and the complexities of human emotion.
So it's like we've mastered the basics and now we're ready to level up our skills.
Exactly.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these advanced techniques.
Well, for example, when you're dealing with conflicts that are rooted in historical injustices or power imbalances, it's crucial to acknowledge those systemic factors.
Okay.
The AEIOU method can be adapted to incorporate things like restorative justice,
Fine.
which focuses on repairing harm and rebuilding trust.
So it's recognizing that sometimes a simple agreement isn't enough.
Right.
There needs to be this deeper process of healing and reconciliation.
Absolutely. And in situations that are highly emotionally charged,
Yeah.
techniques like active listening and emotional intelligence become even more crucial.
Okay.
It's not just about hearing the words someone is saying, it's about understanding the unspoken emotions and needs beneath the surface.
Yeah, because sometimes what people are saying is only a small part of what they're really feeling.
Exactly. And that's where the art of conflict resolution comes in.
Mm-hmm.
It's about combining these methods with a deep understanding of human psychology, cultural sensitivity, and a genuine commitment to creating positive change.
It sounds like it takes a lot of skill and experience.
It does. But even with all these advanced techniques, there will be times when a conflict feels like it just can't be resolved.
Right.
Like no amount of dialogue or compromise can bridge the divide. What do we do then?
That's the question, isn't it?
It is.
And I think it's one that a lot of us grapple with both in our personal lives and on a larger societal scale.
Is there ever a point where we just have to accept that some conflicts are unresolvable? Or is there always hope for finding some kind of common ground?
It's a tough question,
Hmm.
and there's no easy answer. But I do think that even in those situations that seem really impossible to resolve, there's always potential for some kind of progress.
Okay.
It may not be a full resolution, but it could be a change in understanding. Maybe those hard lines soften a bit, or maybe
Correct.
it's just a commitment to coexisting peacefully, even though you have those differences.
So it's not always about everyone agreeing on a solution, but
Yeah.
finding ways to manage the conflict in a way that's constructive.
But how do you even start those types of conversations when the stakes are so high and everyone's emotions are running so strong?
It's true. Those conversations are delicate. It's about creating a space where people feel like they can actually be vulnerable,
Yeah.
where they can talk about their fears and concerns without feeling judged.
Okay, I understand that.
Yeah.
But how do you create that kind of safety when there's already so much tension and mistrust?
Sometimes it starts by just acknowledging the hurt and the harm that's been caused. You validate people's pain even if you don't agree with their perspective.
So empathy, even when it's hard.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's about saying, I see that you're hurting and I want to understand why.
Okay. But what if someone tries to apologize or express empathy and is just met with this resistance or cynicism? What if people aren't ready to forgive or let go of what's happened?
That's where patience and persistence come in. Building trust takes time.
Yeah, especially when there's a history of conflict.
Exactly. It might mean making small gestures, showing goodwill, really listening, and being willing to stick with it even when it's uncomfortable.
So it's a long-term commitment,
Yes.
not a quick fix.
Right.
It's about building a healthier relationship.
Yeah.
What about those conflicts that come from things like misinformation or propaganda?
Oh, that's a good one.
How do you even have a productive conversation when people are working with totally different sets of facts?
That's a challenge we see more and more these days. And that's where navigating beliefs becomes even more important. Instead of trying to debunk misinformation directly, which can actually make things worse,
Right. People get more dug in.
yeah, you can focus on understanding how they arrived at those conclusions.
So you're saying, like, help me understand what sources you're using and how you decide what information to trust.
Exactly. It's about encouraging critical thinking, helping people to really evaluate the media they're consuming and question the information they're getting.
That feels so important now,
It really is.
especially when there's so much information out there and everyone's in their own echo chambers.
Exactly.
It can feel pretty overwhelming, though. Like, how do you even begin to tackle a problem that big?
It starts with each of us taking responsibility for how we consume information. Be mindful of our own biases. Look for different viewpoints and talk to people who see things differently.
So you're setting an example
Right.
and hoping that creates a ripple effect.
Exactly.
What about conflicts that are happening on a global scale,
Okay.
like international disputes or political polarization? Can these methods make a difference when things are that big?
I believe they can, although it might look a little different. On a global scale, it's about things like diplomacy, building relationships that are based on respect and making space for dialogue even when there's deep disagreement. It's about remembering that we're all human and finding ways to work together even when we don't see eye to eye.
So you scale up those same principles.
Yeah.
Empathy, understanding, collaboration.
Exactly.
But what happens when you're dealing with someone who just isn't willing to engage in good faith? What if they're using these methods to manipulate people? Or if they just want to win no matter what?
That's something to watch out for. Not everyone comes to the table with the same intentions. And sometimes you might have to set boundaries to protect yourself.
Yeah.
Or even walk away from the conversation if it's not productive anymore.
So sometimes the best thing you can do is to just recognize when a situation is unhealthy and take care of yourself.
I think so. And even in those situations where you just don't see a way to resolve things, there's still value in using these methods.
Okay.
They help you understand your own values, the different layers of the conflict, and make better choices about how to move forward.
So it's not always about a happy ending, but about handling tough situations with some wisdom and compassion
Exactly.
and staying true to yourself.
Well said. And I think that's why these methods are more than just techniques. They're a way of life. It's about being curious and empathetic and engaging with the world in a more meaningful way.
I like that. It's not just about solving conflicts. It's about becoming better people.
Yeah, exactly. They're creating this world
Yeah.
that you can be a part of. You
Yeah.
know, it's like this quirky little farm where the cows are, calling the shots.
Yeah, they're the stars.
Yeah.
And then they take it a step further
Okay.
with subscribe and we'll name the next cow after you.
Oh, wow.
Which is like, okay.
That's next level.
I mean, how many people are really clamoring to have a
Yeah.
cow named after them?
That's a good question.
But it's like they're really trying to
Yeah.
make you feel like part of the...
They're appealing to our vanity a little bit.
Heck yes. So.
Like, who doesn't want a cow named after them? Yeah, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? When do we just have to accept that some conflicts just can't be resolved? I mean, you can't force people to change their minds, especially when those beliefs are tied to who they are as people.
It's so complex.
Yeah.
And there isn't an easy answer.
Yeah.
But I do think that even in those situations that feel impossible, there's always a chance for some kind of progress.
Okay.
Maybe not a complete resolution, but maybe people start to understand each other a little bit better.
Yeah.
Where those hard lines soften just a little. Maybe it's just agreeing to coexist peacefully, even though you have different views.
So it's not always about finding the perfect solution. It's about finding ways to make the situation a little bit better.
Exactly.
But how do you even start those kinds of conversations when things are so tense and everyone's emotions are just raw? It feels like the whole thing could explode if you say the wrong thing. You're right. It takes a very delicate touch. You need to create a space where people feel safe enough to be vulnerable, where they can really express those deep fears and concerns without feeling judged or dismissed.
Okay. I get that.
Yeah.
But how do you even create that kind of safety when there's so much tension and mistrust already? It's like trying to build a bridge over a giant chasm.
Sometimes it starts with just acknowledging the pain that's been caused.
Okay.
You validate people's pain even if you don't agree with their perspective. It's about saying, I see that you're hurting and I want to understand.
So it's about empathy.
Yes.
Even when it's hard.
Exactly.
But what if someone apologizes or tries to show empathy and the other person just pushes back? Like they're cynical or just not ready to forgive. What do you do then?
That's when you need patience and persistence. Building trust takes time, especially when there's been conflict in the past.
Yeah.
It might take small gestures, consistent effort, listening, being willing to stay engaged even when it's hard.
So it's not a one-time thing. It's about building something healthier for the long run.
Exactly.
What about those conflicts that are fueled by things like misinformation or propaganda?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
How do you even have a productive conversation when people are basically working with different sets of facts?
That's one of the biggest challenges we face today, and it's where navigating beliefs is so important. Instead of trying to debunk the misinformation directly, which can actually make things worse.
Yeah, people get more dug in.
Exactly. You can focus on understanding how they got to those beliefs in the first place.
So you're saying, like, help me understand what sources you're using and how you decide what information to trust.
Exactly. It's about encouraging critical thinking, helping people learn how to evaluate information
Yeah,
and question what they're being told.
that feels more important now than ever,
Absolutely.
especially with so much information out there and everyone's stuck in their own echo chambers.
It's overwhelming.
It is. It feels overwhelming.
Huh.
Like, where do you even begin with a problem that big?
It starts with each of us being responsible for how we consume information, being aware of our own biases, seeking out different perspectives, and talking to people who see things differently.
So leading by example
Yes.
and hoping that it spreads.
Exactly.
What about conflicts that are happening on a global scale,
Okay.
like international disputes or political polarization? Can these methods actually make a difference when we're talking about things that big?
I think so, although it looks a little different.
Okay.
On that scale, it's about diplomacy, building relationships based on respect, creating opportunities for dialogue, even when there are huge disagreements.
Yeah.
It's about remembering our shared humanity and finding ways to work together.
So taking those same principles, empathy, understanding, and collaboration,
Yes. Yeah.
and applying them on a larger scale. But what happens when you're dealing with someone who's not playing fair?
Yeah.
What if they're just trying to manipulate people or they just want to win at all costs?
That's definitely something to watch out for.
Hmm.
Not everyone approaches these situations with good intentions. Sometimes you have to set boundaries, protect yourself, and even walk away from the conversation if it's not doing any good.
So sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to recognize when a situation is unhealthy and just walk away.
I think so. And even in those situations where you just don't see a way to resolve the conflict, there's still value in using these methods.
Okay.
They can help you to really understand your own values, the complexity of the situation, and make better choices about how to move forward.
So it's not always about a perfect solution, but about handling those tough situations with wisdom and compassion
Exactly.
and staying true to yourself.
Perfectly said. I think that's why these methods are more than just techniques. They're really a way of life. It's about being curious and empathetic and engaging with the world in a more meaningful way.
I really like that. It's not just about resolving conflict. It's about becoming better people.
Exactly.
And that's a perfect place to wrap up our deep dive for today.
It is.
We hope this has given you some insights and tools to use in your own life.
We do.
Thanks for joining us.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.